Here we are in Ostia. This is Ostia Antica. The word comes from the Roman word for mouth, os. This is the harbor city of Rome. And when you look at it, you can see it's just a fossilized city. Everybody goes to Pompeii. When you go to Pompeii, you have to jostle with all of the tourists who are there because it's so famous. But here, I think we're the only people I've seen on site, which is fabulous. And we get a view of a city life here in Ostia, which you just don't in Pompeii. Pompeii is a really nice, middle-sized Italian town. This tells us how Romans lived in Rome. If you want to know what a Roman apartment block was, you come here. If you want to know what it was like to be in a really busy bath complex, this is the place to come. And so I want to show you this place. It's just an eye-opener for letting us know what it was like to live in everyday Rome. What a way to start a visit to Ostia than to start the Neptune baths. It's the biggest bath complex in Ostia, and it gives us an idea of what they did, I think, on a daily basis here. So we've climbed up the stairs because actually this is unusual for ancient sites, is that we have actually a first floor. And we've climbed up here because it really gives us a great vantage point for understanding what a bath complex is like. Whenever I see this sort of arrangement, I go straight for Seneca and his letter about living above the baths. Now, Seneca was a Stoic philosopher, so for him, you should be able to cope with any kind of vicissitudes of life. Anything lousy you should be able to cope with. So try to picture him being a scholar trying to write and a philosopher trying to write when he's living above the baths, is what he's saying. And when I look at this bath complex here and I see this rather large mosaic here with the triumph of Neptune here, and you see these swimming sort of people as well as, you know, fantasy creatures like this lion with the snake tail. When I see these mosaics, I try to picture the people around here and what they're talking about and the kind of noise that Seneca was talking about. He was hilarious. He talks about the noises made by the depilators who are plucking the underarm hairs of their, I was going to say patients, but I think patients is probably the right word, masseurs slapping people around. And then over here in this central area here, that's the palaestra. So we just see a grassy field right now. But in antiquity, it was the place where men played ball. And we only hear about men playing ball. I imagine women played ball too. And they played a game of what looks like dodgeball. You know, you have to hit each other. And there's a whole, as we walked into the baths, all these little rooms, you can imagine that some of them are selling the sausages that Seneca talks about. And you picture them eating sausages, doing their exercise, and then angling for those dinner invitations that we know that they do. You see, people in the Roman world, they came here all the time. It was like going to the pub, except you weren't wearing any clothes, which is different. I think about the theater, which we're going to go to as well, and I think about bodies and how people get along, the hierarchies of a Roman society. And one of the things that really occurred to me over the years was that when you came here and weren't wearing any clothes, and you really fancied good bodies. You know, you wanted to have a good body because you had a good mind if you had a good body. And yet you're all mixed in together. So the rich and the poor, the people running the show and the people who are barely eking existence, they all could afford to come here. And they're all looking at each other's bodies. And we know they're looking at each other's bodies. And yet you can imagine that the workers, they've got toned bodies, aren't they? They're doing things which are going to keep them in shape. So this is a time when you're all bumping into each other, and actually the hierarchies are sort of turned upside down, where the poor people, they're the ones who boss, really, with their bodies. And here we are in Ostia, and you can just picture it right here. Okay, so we've arrived at the theater, and actually We've been surprised by how much work is going on here. We've got drilling work, we've got people carefully doing the stairs, just making sure that the theater's all right. So this is a theater, if you look at it, it's about the size of the theater in Pompeii, and that really doesn't give you an idea of the scale of this site. So Ostia is something like 60 hectares. It's huge, and you can only see the bottom section of it, and that was redone in the era of Mussolini, who wanted to go back to the glories of Rome. But you can see that with the stonework in the back, that this would have gone way higher than that. So this is a sizable enough theater, which would have held spectacles, and they would have been performing where we see the columns there. And then we had the people sitting there and all arranged in order. I think this is a really funny thing that Rome does, and by Rome, I mean all of the cities in the Roman Empire. You have to, by law, go to the theater if you're a male, wearing your toga. Augustus is very clear. Augustus passed this law in 18 BC, and he was very clear that they were people of the toga, and so you went to the theater in your toga. You sit according to your rank, so you have the elites in the bottom, of course, because they want to be on show. And the higher up you go, the less elite you are, until you get to parts that aren't visible there anymore because it's fallen down. And that's where women and freedmen are sitting up there, all arranged hierarchically, the opposite of a bath complex. Now, this is great. And you see theaters in most Roman cities. What you don't see is what's all around us. So as we walk around here, there's like a green room, there's a peristyle, sort of like a courtyard area right next to the theater. And around there is something which makes me go goosebumpy every time I see it. Today we call it the Piazza della Corporazione. It's the futures market of the Roman Empire, and I thought we'd look at that next. It's a colonnaded area. You can see the remains of the columns here. And so this would have been covered over. And in the back, you have like an office. And then all along, you have mosaics, which tells you what the offices are for. So there's a whole series of different offices. Each one has a little picture on it, and it tells you what they're doing in the office there. They're not buying things actually there. So it's not like a shop. You're not going to go there and get something. Instead, when you read the mosaics, it's really interesting. There's a whole load of them with ships on the mosaics, and they say Navik, and you can see that there. And these are ships that are coming from different parts of the empire. There's a whole load of them that come from North Africa. So what are they buying in North Africa? Well, they're buying a lot of grain, and they're buying a lot of, cereals, a lot of olive oil and things like that. So each one, you would go to them, you try to figure out what you're trying to sell and what you're trying to buy, and you'd go, because they would tell you where they're from. So, hey, well, look at this one. They're from Carthage. How do we know? Because it says, it's called a tabula ansata. It's a little inscription there. And in the mosaics, it says Navi Kul, and then it says Carthago. So you got to hire something, you got to buy something from Carthage. And from Carthage, it's going to be any number of things. It could be pottery, actually. It can be marble. It could be, your grain and your olive oil. And you got to buy that there. And you need to be imagining not only merchants trying to make a buck, by importing things and selling it at a higher price, but you also have imperial agents trying to get the supplies needed for Rome. You need to picture Rome is 1,000,000-something people, 1,200,000 people. And those people need to be fed. If they're not fed, then we're in trouble. This is my favorite, I think. You see it's an elephant, and that elephant comes from Sabratha. The mosaic says it's Sabra Tensium, so from Western Libya, and they're going to buy grain and olive oil and things like that, just to make sure that Rome, is okay. These are the sorts of things I find super interesting. How do you actually plan the whole thing? How do you actually get from A to B? And these early ones, these early offices, talk to us not so much about the goods that are being sold, but actually the making of the ships themselves. So you have the caulkers, the stupatores, you have the people who are making leather, and we don't know why you need leather. Why do you need leather in this process? And I think it's actually those little bits of leather that you need to make the sails. Then you also need the loaders and the unloaders. Ostia is the mouth of the river, and so you can't have those big seafaring ships go up the river. So you need the dockers to go into the caudicare, they're called. And all this is all happening here. Now try to picture this as a model of the Roman Empire, where you have people from Carthage, you have people from Sambrata, you have people in that direction from Gaul, and in that direction you have people from Spain. They're all coming here. The agents presumably actually live and come from the city, and they're all mixing. What languages are they speaking? Not their own. They're not going to be speaking Punic here. They're going to be speaking Latin, but also Greek. And so that means that all over, this is a great way for people to come together, share customs, share knowledge. And also, this is just a model of globalization. If we want to think about the world made small through global trade, this is it. This is so modern. And it's all here in Ostia, in the Piazzale delle Corporazioni. This is one of my favorite things to do in any archaeological site, any country in the world. This is the Casa di Diana. It's an apartment block. And you can see, looking here, you can piece together people's lives. Look at this. This is the ground floor. And when you see these shutters here, this is a concertina door, and you see these grooves, this is a shop. They're selling things on the ground floor that the rest of the apartment block needs. These are 3-4-story buildings here. This is not anything you see in Pompeii, of course, because Pompeii, those are atrium houses by and large. Here, this is right next to Rome, and what we have is apartment blocks. These are insulae. These are people who are living cheek by jowl, and so you always have shops on the ground floor, and then right above them, you can see those windows there. That's where the poshies live. And the further up you go, on the 4th floor, the poorer you are. You don't have running water up there. And if you need the loo, well, you go down into one of these areas here for the latrine. But otherwise, you're using your old chamber pot. And they're always smaller, dank, darker up there. But you're all living together, cheek by jowl. If you come in this way, look at this shop here. Again, another shop. Do you see the stairs going up there? Why they're there? You can see there's a story there. The shopkeeper lives on the mezzanine floor, right below the posh apartments. Right down there, we're going to take a little walk, and we're going to see how this apartment building, where they would have gone to eat. Because right next to it, we have a bar. And I mean bar in an Italian sense, like a cafe. We call it a thermopolium. It's where you get your food. You see, it's illegal to have kitchens in your apartments because it's dangerous. So where do you eat? You eat in your local takeaway, your local bar here. Now, we see the shelves behind there, so that's going to be dried food. Your fruits, your bread. You also buy bread at the bakery, but that kind of food. But also you have, stews and wet food that we know about, meats. This is how you eat. You don't cook for yourself. This is Ostia. You get paid, and all those jobs that we talked about in the Piazzale delle Corporazioni, you get paid. You don't grow your food. You buy your food. And I also think about the woman who's here, the men who are here serving the food day in, day out. They're not free, are they? And they're bound to be on the menu themselves, meaning that the people who live right opposite them in their apartment buildings, know exactly who these women are. Women, I'd imagine. And they probably strike a fancy with some of them. And you know that the people who own this place are going to allow some of that to be commercialized. In here, right in here, you can see various things that they're digging in and getting. This is dried food that they're getting. Breads or even dried nuts and dried fruits that are here. And then moving inside, look at this. This is, I don't think there's a bar in the world that's better than this in the ancient world for recreating what it would have been like to come into it. Here you have more food stacked up. And there's a fresco there which tells us a little bit about the foods that you could buy. So you have a drink there, and you have, it looks like a parsnip. No, thank you. But anyway, and there are your dried fruits in there. It's all about the neighborhood, isn't it? This is your neighborhood calf, if you'd like, your greasy spoon. This is what Ostia is all about. It's all high rises and living on takeaway food. It's your McDonald's, isn't it? So we've just come from the apartment block, and you know we've talked about they're buying their food from the greasy spoon. Just right around the corner is one of the bakeries that you find in Ostia. And you've probably been to Pompeii, so you probably know what a bakery is like, but it's actually different in Ostia. So I'm going to take you right here. But before we go in and look at the bakery, I want you to notice, perhaps, that these are the grain stores here. The Horia. There's lots of Horia, but there is a grain store right here, and that's important for what I'm going to say next. So if you come in here, look at this. I love bakeries because this is how you lived. This is how you survived. It was such a staple in the ancient world. And this pistrinum gets its name because the bakers, the pistores, they take the grain, literally from the grain storage, which is there, and they make the flour in these querns. They're called querns. I'm sure you've seen them before. You have a meta on the bottom, which is this solid thing here, and it's a cone coming up, and you put the catulus on top. And the catulus moves. There's no way I'm going to make it move today. But you have a piece of wood that's going to come out this way, which is fixed in by pegs here, and you have one on the other side as well. You put your grain here. So by grain, I mean mostly wheat, but also millet and spelt. Barley is for Greeks and for gladiators. And how do you move it? Well, you're not going to get people actually moving them. They are actually donkeys that are going around and around. I always try to consider how tight it is for some of these donkeys to go around. I mean, look at this. So here I am. And this is enough space for them. And we know that they're donkeys, especially from Pompeii, actually, because and Herculaneum, because you actually find the skeletons in there. Donkeys come with special extras, don't they? And I'm trying to picture in this area here where they're just making flowers, having donkeys who are making a mess at the same time. So they must have had some kind of sacks behind them. But, you know, that's not going to work perfectly either. So at the same time, you're trying to catch the flower. You're trying to make sure you're not stepping in any kind of mess, too. Don't think it's health and safety. Well, this is the second stage of the process. You got your flour. You avoided the donkey mess. And then you put it in here. And all of these things here, you can see from the hole in this one, that they have some kind of a blade in there. I don't mean a sharp blade, but kind of like a mixing blade that would have gone in here. And they literally would have stirred the flour in here with water, with a leaven, and they made their dough. This is the second part of the process. This is on an industrial scale because Ostia needs to make sure that their people, vast numbers of people, are fed and happy. Rome needs to have them happy because Rome needs that grain. So it's Rome and Ostia, the only two cities that you have free food. So you can imagine some people are going to want to live here and to take advantage of this sort of like a social benefit. All right, so we've got the flour, we've made the dough. In a pistrinum, in an ancient bakery, you do the whole thing. Just around here, you have the remnants of an almighty industrial oven. It's all done from start to end. And this is actually where you sell it as well. So bakeries is where you go. We hear about bread at various times. I like Horace talking about crunchy bread because you get the idea that some of that, the mill, the stone, gets caught up in the dough. And so their teeth sometimes gets worn down by the bread. Still outside the bakery here, and you can see by this groove here that this is the shop. Now, when we talk about the dole and your free bread, how does that work? Well, actually, you don't get free bread itself, you get free grain. So you get 5 times a month, you get a portion of grain. So 5 times a month, you pick up your portion and you get your grain. You don't have a kitchen. It's illegal to have a kitchen in your apartment. So what do? You get your grain and you bring it to the bakers. And the bakers will bake it for you, but take a cut themselves, which means the bakers are literally making money out of the state, isn't it? I don't know. Does it work well? I think it's enough to keep you from starving. I don't know that people in Ostia ever really starved. It kept you alive anyway. This is the forum area, and you can see with the columns that have been re-erected here. It would have been covered over. You'd be meeting your people here. Augustus, I love the way Augustus always complained. He said, when you go to the forum, make sure you wear your toga because we're people of the toga, which tells us nobody was wearing the toga because they were really uncomfortable. So you'd be probably wearing your tunic here, men and women. Don't just think that women are hiding away at home. Not in the Roman world, they're not. Augustus is not just an emperor, he's a god, isn't he? You know, the emperors who are ruling Rome, which is only just an hour's drive away, not far. They're not just ruling Rome, they're ruling the world. And so you venerate them, you make them gods. Where you see bricks, transform it into marble. It's all marble clad. It would have been splendid. And that is the Capitolium of Ostia. So the Capitolium is a temple dedicated to Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva. If you're a Roman city, you have a Capitolium. And what I like is that this is a city of bricks. 2nd century Rome in this part of the world, it's all built out of bricks. So at the moment, it looks pretty, but actually, it would have been covered over in marble and would have been gleaming in marble and would have looked very grand indeed. We're thinking about everyday life in Ostia and just, you know, what it tells us about living in a Roman town. And I have to say, this is one of my favorite spots. It's one of the best foracae in an ancient site, in any kind of ancient site. This is the best kind of latrine, in other words. So what do we have? You have 2 doors. That's pretty cool. And you walk in, and you can see that they're separated, which is, I find interesting. In the middle, you have a separation, some kind of a wall, and then you have this basin right here where you wash your hands. I'm endlessly interested by latrines. We know what they're doing, right? Because they're pretty basic needs. But we don't know how they're doing it. We know that they have some sort of a notion of hygiene, because otherwise you wouldn't have the water here washing your hands. But how you sat down, where you sat down, did you sat down next to each other? There all this etiquette, which we today take for granted. You can see this water course going around here, all around. What we don't know is what it's there for. I personally think it's just a water spill. It's a spillover. Some people have argued in the past that it's for your sponge stick the xylospongium, and we know that they did exist. So that is a stick with a sponge at the end of it, and some people have argued that that's where you clean your sponge stick before or after application. And also we have a reference in Marshall, the writer, about a prisoner of war who kills himself by sticking the sponge stick down his throat, which is pretty. But otherwise, we know from Herculaneum and the recent excavations from the sewage system there that they use little pieces of cloth. So I'm not sure that we need to think sponge stick. I'm not sure that we need to think of this water channel as something which is cleaning the sponge stick either. Now, how often do you come to the latrines? Do you say, like today, do we say, oh, it's that time, and do you go to the latrine? I don't think so. The reason we have a latrine here is because there's a bath complex right nearby. I think you use a latrine before you go to the baths. So it does make me think. I know from the excavations they did in Herculaneum that actually they have many more parasites here in the Roman world than they did in the Iron Age before the Roman period and the medieval period, because they're living literally cheek by jowl, so to speak. And they're doing their business here. They might be washing their hands, but they're not going to be washing it very well. So whatever you have, whatever kind of worms you have, whatever kind of bacteria you have, whatever kind of, you're passing on to the person who's sitting just exactly right next to each other. So this is both a symbol of, wow, look at Rome and how they can get rid of their effluents. And also, wow, look at Rome and look at how well you can get sick very fast by going to the baths and the trains. I think this is definitely my favorite part of Ostia, I think. For all those questions. Here we come to the end of our visit to Ostia, and we're literally come to the end of our exploration of everyday life. We're in the Necropolis, right outside the city. These series of tombs which people built to commemorate their dead, which are all dotted along here. You see a really nice strigulated sarcophagus here. And there is the deceased here. You can see by his eyeballs here that this is 3rd century or so AD, and he's showing himself with his toga. So he's showing off the fact that he's a citizen. You wonder whether that's his wife. Usually you get shown together, so it's hard to know. But it's one of the many sarcophagi here that were found in Ostia. If we go down here, there's a really nice sort of a mausoleum down here, which dates to the 1st century, so earlier than that. As I'm walking here, I'm just minded of, Roman ideas of their deaths and what it was like. For Rome, sadly, there was no idea of, well, it's okay, there's a next life. We have something to look forward to. You really don't. Actually, the most you hope for is that you die and you're taken to a really nice tomb, and that your family celebrates you, commemorates you, feeds you. There's a refrigarium. You actually feed the dead with honey, milk, and wine. Do you remember that line from Cornelia, mother of the Gracchi, when she said to Gaius, who actually does die shortly after she gave the speech when she said, Gaius, if you continue on this dangerous political path, you will die. And then who's going to look after my tomb? That was a big deal for her. She wasn't worried about her old age. She was worried about her tomb. Are you going to come to my tomb? And you going to look after me? You're going to feed me? You're going to commemorate me? That's what you want. So that's why you have all these tombs dotted along that main road coming into Ostia Antica. And looking at these tombs and looking at, the state, their condition here, it's an interesting thing to think about why Ostia is in such great condition. So of all of the archaeological sites in Italy, everybody goes to Pompeii and Herculaneum, and rightly so, they're fantastic. But you also get masses of people there. You don't have them here in Ostia, which is really interesting. And yet it's really well preserved. And why is it well preserved? Well, the mouth of the river, that very source of commercial life for Ostia, silted up in late antiquity. And as Rome becomes less and less of a market, less and less important, as the capitals of the Western Roman Empire move to Milan and then move to Ravenna, Rome becomes a backwater. Who needs all that stuff coming in anymore? The river silts up, and with the silting up, you get malaria. So gradually, people just abandon the site, and it's abandoned to itself. And that's a sad end, in ways, to a once hugely bustling city. But their loss is our gain. And so today, you can uniquely see apartment blocks in Ostia like no other place. And that's because the city came to this sticky, slow end.